One of the challenges of being a medium is proving the continuation of life. And the field of mediumship has really changed throughout the years here in the West. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, we were very focused on just the concept that life continued after death. And there was a lot of testing that was done of mediums at that time to prove that their experiences were authentic. Sometimes they were bound when they would go in trance, they were stuck with needles. Sometimes the physical phenomena that was coming through them, the apparition of spirits, were weighed and measured. I know the most extreme example, the spirit actually weighed 50 pounds and the medium lost 30 pounds while they were in trance, creating an apparition that other people could see. Then mediumship evolved a little bit further, and we started getting demonstration mediums, maybe with Sylvia Brown. And now today we have Teresa Caputo and Lisa Williams, John Edwards, a lot of famous people that are doing public mediumship. They're demonstrating the art of mediumship in front of groups. Now I think things are shifting a little bit more, perhaps, into everyone that has an interest being able to have a personal experience, to be able to experience their encounters. And so I focus on education because I like to share both my experiences and also help others develop their gift. One of the most interesting ways that we as mediums provide evidence is through the description and the communication of the personality of the person that we've connected with in spirit. There are sightings that individuals have had, but another particularly interesting way is capturing the resonance and the communication of that spirit in a physical manner so that we can hear it. And one of those ways is electronic voice phenomenon. Today's guest is a paranormal investigator. He's also an author. He wants to be defined first as a father of 6. He has a son and 5 daughters, and he was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and he's lived there most of his life with some brief exceptions. He's a photographer. He's been an art director, a graphic artist, a web designer, and then he discovered EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon. And since then, he's devoted his life to both personal EVP research. He's also a member of an investigation team known as the Perry Hill Paranormal Research Society. In that process, in 2009, 2010, he wrote 2 books. One is called Voices from Forever, and the other is called There Is No Silence. And because his first EVP experience was so profound, he really had a life perspective change, and he sees life as going beyond, that there is a vibrant reality that awaits us and a greater continuation of our spirit and our humanity. In other words, death is not the end. It's actually our inauguration to forever. I love that. He says that EVPs have altered and amplified his understanding of the subtle concepts of truth and illusion. And he communicates that through his writings and podcasts. He has a podcast called The Voices and a blog called The Voices. And I'd like to warmly welcome our guest today, Randy Keller. Welcome to our show.
Hi there. Thank you.
Some of our guests like to look up our guests while we're on air. So I'm going to let them have your website. It's randallkeller.com.
Yes. I should tell you, PHPRS, Perry Hall Paranormal Research Society, was disbanded, and I'm now working with Inspired Ghost Tracking.
Oh, wow. Inspired Ghost Tracking. And is that also based in Maryland?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm curious, since you alluded in your bio about your first EVP that you captured or encountered, I want to know more about that. So.
Well, it's really was sort of a life-changing moment because I was a huge skeptic. There's a story as to that, and if you don't mind, I'll just extend this a second. And, when we were
Absolutely.
kids, another guy and I were hanging around out in the neighborhood about 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. And we shouldn't have been, of course, but we were. And a friend of ours came home from her job as a waitress. It was during the summer, and she told us all about a blue lady who floated on the back of her yard over the supposed unmarked graves of the people who lived in the mansion nearby. And she said she'd just seen her, and she comes out every morning at 5 a.m. And she was surprised we didn't see it. And so the very next night, we showed up with a carload full of guys, and we were all going to sit there and watch. And at 5 a.m. in the morning, every single one of us, except for me, saw the blue lady.
Oh, no.
And I found out that she was hoaxing us. She made it all up. It wasn't true. But to this day, every one of those guys claims he saw her.
Wow, the power of expectation.
Yes, and it
Wow.
made a huge skeptic out of me, and I didn't believe anything. But my father passed, and I didn't grieve. I mean, I was sad, of course, and we had a good relationship, but I didn't really grieve until a couple of years later. And then I kind of, the waterworks opened up, and I kind of went berserk for a couple of hours. And I decided I wanted to try and contact him. And I thought EVP might be the way to go. And it took me a few months to get my nerve up, but I finally did some. And right away, I got a voice.
Oh, wow.
It was a female voice mostly, but it was one of those EVPs that you hear that sounds like more than one person is speaking at the exact same time. And what it said was, "Randy, you got to change." And after, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I went a little crazy for a few seconds, I thought I need to do this again.
Yeah.
And so I did. And I had, great luck, great fortune each time I tried. But that was the very first one. And I didn't, of course, know what it meant. But, I mean, I think I do now. I think she was saying that if you want to contact him, if you want to contact us, something about you needs to change. And I always sort of thought that was the belief in them, the belief in an afterlife.
Yeah. I think that when we are skeptical about things, it's good to be skeptical in the classic sense, which is asking, sort of like, I'm not certain whether it's true or false, but I will be open to finding out. But when there's a great deal of resistance, it does one of two things. It either pushes away the vibration and the connection with things that are higher, or it creates a situation where there's animosity and possible aggression because you're pushing against something in arrogance rather than humility.
Yeah, I was just actually thinking while you were speaking of the exact words of animosity. I thought that exact word when you said it. It is true, I think. And so I always enter, whether it's a research project or whether it's an investigation, I always enter with an intense belief that they're there and that they will speak with me if they choose, and that everything will be fine. And then I'll let the evidence at the end prove me wrong.
Yes.
And that's where my skepticism comes in. That couldn't possibly be what I think it is because of this, that, and the other. But while I'm there, I am the ultimate believer. And I think that works for me. And I think they like that, because who would want to speak to somebody who doesn't even believe in them?
Right. And on top of that, I think that conflict that people have, and it's a very human one, is that our left brain is so proof oriented.
Yes.
Prove it to me. Do you know what I mean? How many, when, who, what, where, name, address, phone number, or whatever. And then our right brain is that intuitive, perceptive, emotional, deep understanding of situations, which don't always use the same avenues to communicate that our left brain does. I know in readings, sometimes the person is listening with their left brain, their critical side, not in a hostile way, of course, because people come for a reason, you know,
Yes.
but they're analyzing things and they may jump to a conclusion when they hear something. So it's really good when they record things because that brings them back to what was actually said rather than their perception of it at that time. And it seems like in your work, that's another benefit of actually recording what you experience so that as time passes, you can see a deeper meaning or make new connections or find additional evidence.
Oh, yeah. The really good thing about being blessed enough to record at this point thousands of EVP isn't so you can say, I've got thousands of EVPs. It's so you can start to get sort of a psychology of them. You know, you can, it's kind of like making a model. You can put the pieces together and pretty soon you start to get an understanding of what possibly existence might be like for them, what they experience, what their feelings are. For instance, we know that a spirit probably doesn't have tactile senses like we do, but they still remember them. They still appreciate them. I've had spirits say things like, sweets, when I pull candy out.
Oh, wow.
They're not going to eat my candy because I'll slap them.
Right. It's your candy. That's right.
But they're thinking about it. You know, they're thinking, oh, how wonderful that was. And that sort of thing. And I've had them comment on food frequently. But there are other things that they'll say that, like their sense of time. It's different from ours, yet it can be experienced on the same linear way our time is experienced. And I know this by the things they've said and the, you know, how they've reacted to stuff. Or just recently, I asked out of the clear blue sky, I said, do you guys sit and watch TV with us at night? And the one guy said, well, yes, of course. And another voice said, you
know, I find it sort of oddly comforting to know that you're getting the same types of feedback about what their experience is like, because as a medium, I see, hear, and feel them, but it's sort of like pulling out of thin air a story. Do you know what I mean? Or facts or things. And there is that left brain part of us, you know, and me too, that, you know, even though I don't doubt what I do because it's, you know, it proves to be accurate in the long run, you know, over time, anything foretold or whatever, or, you know, the personality comes forward and how would I know that, you know, kind of thing. But there is that kind of piece of me that's like, wow, this is really wild. Like, I'm actually communicating with people that no one else can see. And then to have your, I wanted to say art, but I'll call it a science also, of being able to gather that sense of connection between the two worlds is just amazing to me. It's just like, yeah, that's how it is. Yes, that's how it is. You know, I feel like so excited when I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it is too, but because you know, but I must say, you know, it's all the spirit. It's not me.
Yes,
You know?
yeah. Oh, it is in my case too. It's not like, you know, like sometimes I was telling a client the other day, or well, student the other day, I said, yeah, you know, even though I do this for a living and I teach it, when I go to a reading, especially after 3 or 4 days of not reading, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. You know, like I don't, you know, whoa. And my guides will calm me down and just say, no, you don't. But we do. And it's just a matter of relaxing and opening into that vibration. And they provide the information. It's not from us, it's from them. So good point.
You mentioned vibration a couple times now, and that interests me because coming from the 60s, you know, we used to say vibrations in a little different way, you know, like like, I want some good vibes here or whatever, I can't
Right.
remember. I'm too old now. But they,
It's so not true.
they,
Go ahead.
everything in life, this is scientifically true, vibrates.
Yes.
And it's a lot of people think, oh, there's that icky, medium talk, or,
Mm-hmm.
psychobabble
Woo
of
woo. Yeah.
vibrations, But it's true. Everything vibrates. And that's how they communicate through EVP, through vibrations.
And it is a science, not only in the fact that you're receiving a recordation of the frequencies that they're emitting, where I can hear that frequency. Most people can't hear that frequency. And I think, lately quantum physics is starting to come a little bit forward in being able to explain why that would work. What would you say on quantum physics?
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. I mean, we were going to talk, I guess, a little later about my bilocation experiment, but the very basis of that is based in particle bonding, and that's part of quantum mechanics. I think quantum physics, with up to at least 11 dimensions at this point, has proven, at least to me and to some others, that it's possible for the spirit or anything that is not confined by the 3 dimensions that we live in could possibly be not only existing right within the same space as we are, but right next to us, between the atoms. There's absolutely no reason why that is not possible. So the people that we record or that you see or feel could be right here all the time, and because they
Yes.
experience the entire dimensional archive of possibilities, they are aware of us.
Yes, yes.
We're not aware of them.
Yeah, that ties in with sort of the old spiritualist teachings of the different bodies, that we each have different subtle bodies that are at different, for lack of a better word, resonance or frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
That, we have our physical body, and then we have our astral body, and then our etheric, and I don't know all of them off the top of my head. There's a catheric and some others, but they all are, and some of the ways that it's been depicted is sort of like imagining a person standing in front of you, and then kind of a shadow form of that person a little bit above, and another one, and another one, and another one, going up and up into light and disappearing. And I kind of think of us as sort of phasing into the physical realm. And I know when ghosts that are the tweeners, the ones that are sort of still physically tied, or even
Right.
apparitions and appearances from other higher beings, they're pushing themselves somehow into the physical dimension, trying to lower their vibration so they can become either physically seen or felt, touched, or heard in our realm, because we of course depend on our 5 senses.
Yeah, and that is quantum mechanics there that you're talking about, really. And the thing about it is that, I believe all paranormal type things will one day become normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that means there's an explanation. And I'm not much for mysticism. I do have religious beliefs, but that they don't counter any of this.
No,
My
yeah,
religious
usually not.
beliefs don't.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, I believe there's an explanation. The trouble is we don't have it, and we're not really that close to finding it. But there is an explanation. So to find them in vibrations and in resonance theory and in quantum explanations is very reasonable to me, because I believe that God, whoever created us,
Mm-hmm.
made a physical scientific world for our benefit and for our edification. And so I don't believe that there are any any mysteries that we won't be able to solve at one point or another.
Yes, I agree with you. People talk about it paranormal or supernatural, sort of to differentiate the physical from the less visible or the etheric, but I really don't. I think it's a continuum. I really think it's a continuum between the two, sort of like the phases of, at what point does water become vapor, and at what point does vapor condense to water and water freeze to, at what point does it not be what it is the whole time?
Yeah, and there are examples in life, like you just mentioned with the water. Things constantly change. Everything goes from one state to another state, and continues to exist. The caterpillar in this cocoon becomes the butterfly. Like you said, water becomes steam or whatever, vapor. And I think our essence, our soul, if you will, our spirit, does the same thing. It leaves this body, this container, and goes into another existence.
It's really amazing. And I can understand that. I know you said that you sort of left your creative venues behind, although I don't think they're too far behind you because you obviously carry creativity with you. But what why did you go full time into doing this? What was that's a pretty big shift. It's sort of like people ask me, well, what else do you do, Tracey? And I'm like, nothing. Teach and read.
Why did I know you were going to say nothing? Well, I'll tell you.
Everyone's psychic. That's why.
I'll tell you a story, and if you don't mind.
No, please. I love stories.
But I'll preface it by saying that it's actually a calling. It's not one of those callings like preachers get or anything like that, but it's a calling. And I realized that it was a calling once on an investigation when I was, fairly new. I'd had a few investigations under my belt, but not enough to say I'm the old grizzled vet that I consider myself to be now. I found myself in a funeral home on an investigation, and I found myself alone in one of the viewing rooms, and there was a soft light on a casket with a rather elderly man there, and just he and I. And I sat down in the front row, which was pretty close, and started talking to him very quietly, very personally. And I got into children, and I said, gee, I've got 6 of them, and, they drive me crazy sometimes. And, do you have any children? And, my son is particularly vexes me because, and I went on about that. Mm-hmm. I would pause a little bit to give him a chance to talk. But after listening to the recording, so far, there was nothing.
Yeah.
I got to the end of my little discussion, and let's say his name was Bill.
Okay.
And I said, Bill, you know what it's like to have children, don't you? Surely you have some, and what can you tell me? Do you have any advice? We're gonna love them no matter what they do, and do you have children, Bill? And there was a very soft, quiet, gentle, clear, whispered voice that said, I have a son.
Oh.
And I learned from that comment 2 things. First of all, he didn't had a son. Mm-hmm. It wasn't past tense. He has one. I have a son, he said.
Yes.
And I learned he's still going.
Yeah.
He's not gone.
Yeah, that relationship is still there.
And the second thing I learned was that it was important that I be able to record him. And I needed to continue. Anything they wanted to say was fine with me. I was a conduit and nothing more. And if they wanted to say something, I would be there to record it. And it became kind of a calling.
Mm. Yeah. And you mentioned that you have, accumulated through one by one thousands of EVPs.
Yeah.
What do you attribute your success to anything on that? Because I do think it's actually special to be able for them to want to speak around someone.
I think all that I could really say to answer that, because first of all, it's kind of like a glory to God statement.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think it's in this case it's glory to the spirits.
Yeah.
Because it's their effort. I'm really not doing very much.
Maybe they see you as sort of like a medium in a sense, like a vehicle for their communication.
I think I'm just a guy, and I think I'm somebody who tries very hard to be honest with them,
Yeah.
and who is interested in them, and who cares what they have to say. And I'm willing to let them know that, and I'm willing to let them know me.
Yes.
And as a result, we become kind of temporary friends. And I realize that they have their place and I have mine, and that maybe we won't meet again, but maybe we will. But either way, I respect them and I
Yes.
appreciate them. And we have that bond that humans have, because they're still human. They've just evolved or graduated or whatever word you insert. They're still human.
Yes, yes. I really relate to that. I always feel so grateful when someone first comes for a reading, but second, to be able to meet the people that were important in their life. And I feel like I've met so many interesting people, and I think it is a big honor to communicate with them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Honor is a great word for it, and I've used it many times in the
Yeah.
past. It is an honor, and I'm going to see it as such.
That was one of the main reasons I was so happy to have you on your show, is your respect toward spirit in general. We're coming very close to the bottom of the hour. So on the next side of the hour, we're maybe going to explore some stories that you have and talk about that bilocation experiment. We're going to leave you hanging in mystery until then for those listeners that are out there. And if you want to reach Randall, you can find him at randallkeller.com. And if you want to find me, I'm at mediumtracylockwood.com. We'll be right back.
Now, back to our show, from a medium's perspective, with host, Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Welcome back. If you missed the first half of the show, or if you'd like to listen to any of our other shows again, you can find them here on YouTube. And just if you are not on that station, you can find it, or that channel, you can find it at Medium Tracey Lockwood. Again, my website is mediumtracylockwood.com. And next week, we've been having quite a series of wonderful guests. And next week, I'm going to do a solo show. I haven't done one in a long time, and I'll be adding another episode for the Hardcore Mediumship series. I developed that series so that people that are interested can develop their knowledge of the psychic mediumship field and take themselves to a higher level. And those, of course, are all free here on YouTube. So thank you so much. I'd like to take a minute before we get back to this week's guest and thank Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com for the opportunity that they provide us to air this show. Revolution Radio is the largest free listener-supported radio station in the world. So please help support their efforts and our airtime by visiting the station's support page at freedomslips.com. It's very important to show your support. Otherwise, we can't be here. And there's also some wonderful things on other times too. So check out their station for other opportunities to listen to some cool shows. So I'd like to get back to our guest. author and paranormal investigator, Randall Keller. Randy, I'm so happy to have you on the show, and thank you, and welcome back on the other side of the hour here.
Yeah, I'm really kind of enjoying it, so let's go for another hour.
Sounds like a plan. Sounds like a plan. I may have to have you back. So I wanted, because the show is, yes, from a medium's perspective, but it's really to give the perspective of anyone that has a connection to all things of a higher vibration or lower vibration, or I don't know, whatever. But I like to give that perspective, and part of that is sharing stories. So I wondered if you could share with us maybe some of the types of, maybe first clarify, like, how do you sort your information from EVPs to non-EVPs, if there's such a thing, and then tell us maybe some of your adventures, if you will.
Well, I think pretty much I record everything. And when I'm doing any kind of investigation or any kind of experiment, I tend to like holding the recorder in my hand, because rather than putting it down on the table or walking away from it, although I've done that from time to time, but generally I like to hold it in my hand because I'm inviting them to, it's kind of like an outstretched hand. You know, this is the device that we're going to communicate through, and it's connected to me, and it's part of me, and you can be a part of that, and we can be connected. So I like to do it that way.
Yeah, that's much more personal. Absolutely.
And then when I'm listening, I believe that the average person should have no trouble doing this, but you have to develop the ability to listen in the static and not be listening for those big, important, loud voices, because they're easy to hear. You won't miss those. But what you may miss is the smaller, quieter, the more subtle ones. And generally they say more. I'm not sure why that is, but they seem to be the educators, the teachers, the ones who actually will say something that make you sit up and say, really? Whereas the big, loud A-class EVP that's, will say some really great things, but it's generally not going to educate you much. You won't learn much. It might say, how you doing? Well, what do you learn from that? Whereas and after you've developed the skill to isolate everything and listen in the static, I think that it's there, and it's pretty much everywhere. It's, for those people who say, I've been recording for 20 years and not gotten a single EVP, so they don't exist. Well, they do exist, and they exist pretty much everywhere.
That is absolutely fascinating to me, because that's very similar to how people's psychic abilities open. They tend to pick up on the most simplistic and blatant messages. They are picking up on something. But the depth is when they can tune into those more subtle frequencies and become, in our case, empathically aware of the subtle messages that are developed. And they're spoken through so many different ways, too. It's not just necessarily directly words. And I find it just very interesting that second tier, that more subtle tier of information, tends to be the most profound in your work as well. That's so interesting.
And they're also the EVP, the C class, or the lower B class. They're also the ones that a lot of paranormal people choose to discredit. They're not interested in that. It could be a sliding door. It could be you tapping the table, even though a tapping table never sounded like that.
Right.
They just don't want to hear it, don't hear it themselves, because they're not able to focus. and therefore it doesn't exist. And then they become the dyed-in-the-wool skeptic all over again, even though they would probably be upset with me calling them that. But that's what they become, because they refuse to hear, they refuse to... sometimes when I sign books, I'll write in the book, before we can hear, we have to listen. And sometimes I'll do it the opposite way. Before we can really listen, we have to hear. Because both ways it means something a little different. But it's not going to be easy. Why should it be easy? Why should we sit down and say, all right, Spirit, what do you think is going to happen today? And he says, well, we're going to have rain, and it's going to be a wonderful time at the picnic. I don't think it works that way.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way either. And I think that it would be extremely boring if you had spirits, at least from a medium's perspective, come up to you and say, yes, my name is John Doe. I live at XXX Essex Street, in such and such. My phone number is such and such and such and such. And then I would just be sort of a vehicle of data transmission or database, rather than a human interaction that is so profound, where people are sharing the experiences and stories of their crossing over, of their lives, of their transition on the other side, of their encounters there, what they see. It's just amazing.
And on the other hand, though, I have to be very careful about trying to identify them. Yeah. Because while a medium may very well have other criteria that will be answered, that they can, further identify who they're speaking to or who they're visualizing. As a strict EVP researcher, they can and have lied to me about things from time to time. After all, people lie.
Yes.
So does the spirit of people lie.
Yes, and that being able to differentiate that at our end is important too.
Yeah,
being able, to tune into the higher frequencies. And how do you sort that out? How do you?
Well, sometimes it takes more. We had an investigation not too long ago at an American Legion post, and we generally do not investigate with our mediums. They generally do their thing, and then we do our thing. And but sometimes we'll join in. And one of the mediums, a very talented gentleman, was part of the investigation, and it was a small team. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna hang out with him and see what happens. And he started hearing and speaking to a spirit, and the spirit's lady friend sitting at a table in the corner. And I went along with it because, like I said, I go in as a believer, and I'll disbelieve later, but for now I'm believing. And so I start asking questions along with him, and we're all acting like these two individuals are actually there. And lo and behold, he would turn and he would say things to us like, he said this and she said that, and and when I got back and listened to the recording, sure enough, almost everything that he said the spirit had told him was borne out through EVP.
How cool.
So
that's very cool. Yeah.
And we also had some visual evidence too. We had a very strange phenomenon happen at that table during that part of the investigation. Something visual, I don't really know how to describe it. Unfortunately, most of the visual evidence that I have is, not all of it, but most of it is kind of protected by client privilege.
Sure.
And that's one thing that I absolutely refuse to violate knowingly.
I don't give away names or enough information to indicate even where the person lives, much less. But I do sometimes talk about the stories, I think.
And so that was a fascinating moment for me, because I'm much more inclined, coming from where I am, to believe my evidence than I am what a medium says, because I can't really prove anything and yet there was the proof.
That is so cool. You mentioned earlier about, people lying to you from the other side. Personality continues on the other side. There isn't some magical transformation. The only thing that we lose is our body and anything that is physical that connects us. So if we had an impairment of some type, it's gone. If we had pain, it's gone. But we're still us the second that we pass, just the same personality that we were when we crossed. And
But isn't that the beauty of it?
Yeah, it is. It is. You don't lose yourself. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I think that's a mistake that investigators make, and I think people in general do. They tend to reduce spirits to some sort of, I don't know, mythological definition. The spirits become ghouls, and
they're
creatures.
always evil, which there's some lower vibrational people and spirits around. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I almost never get one.
Yeah. Well, you're not, you're kind of setting an expectation, sort of like, tell me do you do that intentionally when you investigate, as far as like calling in the highest vibrations, or what do you?
No,
or is
I
it
just
because you are the way you are?
I'm just me, and people who've investigated with me will tell you he doesn't do anything different than we do. I don't know why he gets EVPs. Because he's just a person. I mean, there's nothing, nothing magical, nothing, spectacular. I do think they're able, in whatever state they're in, to, somehow read us better than we read one another.
Right.
But I don't do anything unique, and that's why sometimes people will say, "Oh, you've got to be sensitive. You've got to have a gift." And I'm going to tell you, I'm not. I don't. I have no idea about any of that, and yet the results are probably because of the mental preparedness or the mental attitude. I just don't think that it's noticeable.
Yeah. For me, when I'm reading, which is sort of like when you're reading or recording, the negative energies aren't allowed to come near me. And there are people that come through, they're pedophiles and murderers, and people have some interesting families, but they're kind of relegated to an outer thing where I know they're there, but unless they have something positive to say, they're not allowed to say it. And I leave that up to my guides to make sure that gets sorted out. But there are lower vibrational things, and you have to. Sometimes you do encounter them. I want to shift gears kind of abruptly because I don't want to lose a chance to hear about it during the show, and our show's over about 5 minutes before the hour, so I want to squeeze this in. Tell us, if you will, about the bilocation experiments, and for people that are listening. On the other side, people can multi-locate, they can bilocate, and people that are more adept, like, say, Jesus, can be in many places simultaneously. And there is a thought that we can do that in the physical world. So I'm very curious what your experiment was about.
Well, physicists will tell you that particles, and of course that's the level in which they've done experiments, are actually in more than one place at the same time, because the only thing that tells us differently is when we begin to measure them, and looking at them is a form of measurement. So when we look at something, we see it there because we've stopped it at that point, and we're only capable of recognizing what we can measure, or in this case, what we can see. When we're not measuring it, it's all over the place, and that's kind of proved. So, with particles, if particles that have never touched, that have never bonded, if one is spinning to the left, the other is spinning to the right, they don't affect one another. You can change the spin of one and it won't affect the other. But when they touch, and when they become bonded by that touch, You can separate them by thousands of miles, and as you spin the one particle, so will the other particle react and spin in that same direction. So they've been bonded. So
Oh.
for phase 2 of the experiment, with a gentleman in the United Kingdom named John Smart, and he's a member of Oxfordshire and Berkshire Paranormal Research, and he's a good investigator and knowledgeable and all that stuff. We exchanged some things. We've never actually met, so we never bonded. We exchanged some items, and we bonded through our DNA, and hoping that that would create like a superhighway for any spirit to locate one another.
Mm-hmm.
And then we proceeded to record half-hour increments, where during the first half an hour, one of us would have an EVP session while the other one was completely silent, yet recording.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 15 minutes, we would switch off. And what we wanted to do was to take a key word known only to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and have that key word delivered across the ocean to the other person.
Oh, kind of telepathically in a way.
Well, if we ask a spirit on our side to deliver the key word of, balderdash over in England, let's say, if he recorded the word balderdash, then we would know that we had a spirit that was able to be in more than one place at the same time, or at least
Nice. Right.
at least be able to travel really fast,
Wow. Yeah.
So what we had, and I was very fortunate to have John be the partner here, because like me, he doesn't seem like he's all that spectacular, but he has a way about him. And I'll try to be quick. What happened by the third or fourth or fifth experimental day was I began getting English accents.
Oh, cool.
And that's just not enough, is it? Well, the key word for day number 5 was tea on his side of the Atlantic. And he said the word tea, please come and tell Randy about tea. And I like brewed tea rather than tea bags. So I wonder if Randy likes brewed tea, or so on and so forth. Well, in an English accent, I didn't get the word tea. I got the statement, let's brew the mint.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So they didn't want to tell me that keyword. They didn't want to prove it. They weren't going to let me lay claim to anything, but they were letting us know, yep, we can be wherever we want, whenever we want.
Mm.
And it was, it was really the John and his English spirit friends who made this happen. Thousands of EVPs over here in America didn't get any of that to happen.
Right.
But his gentle and coaxing and his wonderful attitude, convinced the British spirits to come across the way and to deliver that. And I find that to be astounding. It's not something I'm trying to take credit for, and I know John's the same way, but I find it astounding because now there's no question that spirit is where a spirit wants to be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the time-space continuum doesn't really seem to matter to them. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of an instantaneous connection. And I think it's to the nanosecond at the same time. That would be my assumption, just because of some other things that I've encountered. We had talked about leaving our listeners with something, sort of a takeaway, and talked about the attitude of approaching paranormal research. Tell us a little about your thoughts on that.
Be a believer while you're doing this. You can't communicate with somebody you don't believe is there. Being respectful is important. If someone died by the hand of another, you don't go up to them and say, "So how's it feel to have an axe through your skull?"
Right.
Show a little common sense. Give them the dignity that they deserve, and that attitude, that approach, is always. I mean, the people I investigate with are always like that. They're the yes sir sometimes, yes ma'am. I mean, you don't
respectful.
Yeah, and I believe that works, and I also believe that that if you are not afraid,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to be afraid of from a human spirit.
Right.
If you're in the presence of a demon, you got a problem. But if you're in the presence of a human spirit, you're fine.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, Randy, thank you so much. For the listeners, again, if you want to find it, randallkeller.com, and you can find me at medium tracylockwood.com. We'll see you next week for another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. And remember, it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, you have nothing.